She lived alone, 23 years old, night shift job at a software company, a small rented apartment at the far edge of the city where street lights flickered and silence felt heavier than sound. Her life followed one cold routine: work, go home, lock the door, sleep. 5 years ago, her mother died in a brutal road accident. She had identified the body herself. She had touched her mother's frozen face. She had lowered her into the grave with her own shaking hands. Death was not a rumor for her. It was a witnessed truth. And yet, at exactly 2:17 a.m., everything changed. Rain tapped slowly against the window. She lay half asleep on her bed, exhausted from work. The room was dark except for the soft blue glow of her phone charging beside her. Then, the ring tore through the silence like a blade. Her eyes flew open, heart pounding, breath stuck in her throat. She grabbed the phone blindly, annoyed and confused. 2:17 a.m. No one ever called her at this hour. When her vision cleared, her blood turned to ice. On the screen, glowing clearly, were the words, "Mom, calling." Same saved contact, same photo, same impossible number. Her fingers trembled violently. "This isn't possible," she whispered. Her mother had been dead for 5 years. The phone kept ringing. She didn't answer. After a few seconds, the call ended. The screen went dark. For a full minute she didn't move. She sat frozen on her bed, staring into the darkness as if something might crawl out of it. She opened the call log. There it was. Incoming call, 2:17 a.m. Mom. That night, she never slept again. The next day, she tried to stay calm. She told herself it was a technical error, a recycled number, a prank, a coincidence. Anything except the truth her mind was screaming. She went to work, pretended nothing was wrong. But every vibration of her phone made her flinch. Every shadow made her turn. She told no one. That night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., the phone rang again. Same name, same photo, same impossible caller. Her body moved before her mind could stop it. She accepted the call. Silence. Then a soft breath, and a voice she had buried 5 years ago whispered through the speaker. "My daughter." Her heart nearly stopped. It was her mother's voice. Same tone, same warmth, same way she used to say her name when waking her for school. "No, this can't be real," she gasped. "You're dead. I buried you." A faint chuckle came from the other end. "You buried a body, not the truth." Tears blurred her vision. "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" "You never saw everything that night." The call disconnected. The phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor. She dropped to her knees, shaking uncontrollably. The following night the call came again. This time, the moment she answered, it ended. Her phone vibrated instantly. A new video file appeared in her gallery. Truth.mp4. Her hands shook as she tapped the screen. The video opened to darkness, then slowly revealed a hospital corridor. White walls, dim lights, security cameras blinking red. Her chest tightened. It was the same hospital where the accident happened. The camera moved into a room. On the bed, she saw herself, unconscious, tubes in her mouth, machines breathing for her, her own body. Then the camera turned. Standing beside the bed was her mother, alive, perfectly alive. Her mother looked straight into the camera and said, "Never tell her the full truth." The video ended. She screamed and threw the phone across the room. Her memories began to tear open. The accident hadn't injured only her mother. It injured her too. She had been unconscious for 2 full days after the crash. 2 days no one ever talked about. The next morning, driven by terror, she went alone to the graveyard. She stood in front of her mother's grave. She paid the caretaker to open it. The soil was removed. The coffin was lifted. The lid creaked open. Inside, there was no body, only a single object, a mobile phone, her mother's phone. The screen lit up on its own. 2:17 a.m. She collapsed into darkness. When she woke, she was in a small clinic near the graveyard. The old caretaker sat beside her, pale and trembling. After long silence, he confessed. After the accident, her mother was declared dead on official papers, but she was secretly transferred to a sealed underground medical ward beneath the hospital. Illegal experiments, human testing, electrical nerve research. She was never allowed to die. Her soul never left that place. The calls were not passing through normal networks. They were traveling through the powerful electromagnetic machines still running underground. From that night onward, the calls never stopped. Every single night. 2:17 a.m. With each call, she began to lose herself. She saw shadows move where no light existed. She heard whispers inside mirrors. She started speaking in her sleep, in her mother's voice. One night, the voice whispered calmly through the phone, "It's time for you to take my place." That same night, she woke up in an underground hospital ward. Machines surrounded her. Cold lights blinded her eyes. Screens turned on one by one. A mechanical voice echoed through the room. Transfer protocol initiated. The next morning, the city awoke to horrifying news. A young woman's body was found inside the sealed underground ward of the hospital. Identity confirmed from records. It was her. She was dead. But the horror did not end there. That night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., her friend's phone rang. On the screen, incoming call, her name. She answered in a trembling voice, and from the other side, the whisper came, "I'm alive." The phone slipped from her friend's trembling hand and hit the floor. The call had already ended, but its echo remained in the air like a scar that would never fade. Her friend stood frozen, staring at her reflection in the dark screen, whispering the same words over and over again. "She's dead. I saw her body. They showed it on the news." Yet the voice had been hers. Alive. The next morning, the city buzzed with rumors. Some said the hospital was cursed. Others said it was a cover-up. Officials sealed the underground ward permanently, declaring it unsafe due to structural damage. Guards were posted day and night, No one was allowed inside. But the calls didn't stop. Every night at exactly 2:17 a.m., a different phone rang. A nurse who once worked in the hospital received a call from her dead brother. A security guard received a call from his wife who had drowned years ago. A doctor received a call from a patient who had died on his operating table. Same pattern, same time, same whisper. And after every call, something followed. People began disappearing, one by one. Each time, the news reported that their bodies were found near the hospital or inside abandoned medical buildings. No wounds, no signs of struggle, just empty expressions frozen on their faces as if their souls had been gently unplugged. Her friend tried to report the call to the police. They dismissed it as a prank. When she insisted, they warned her to stop spreading panic. That night, at 2:17, her phone rang again. This time, she didn't answer. A message appeared instead. "Don't be afraid. You will understand soon." Attached was a video file. Against every instinct, she opened it. The footage showed the underground ward from inside. Machines lined the walls like metallic skeletons. Dim red lights flickered. Cables snaked across the floor like veins. At the center of the room, she saw a figure strapped to a metal bed. It was the same young woman who had died. Her eyes were open. Her body was dead, but her mouth moved. The lips formed words without sound. "Help me." The video cut to static. Her friend screamed and dropped the phone. From that night on, she never stayed alone again. Meanwhile, beneath the hospital, the machines had begun running on their own. Deep underground, where the living were never meant to go, the air vibrated with a low electric hum. Screens flickered with data no human had programmed. Names of the dead scrolled endlessly across monitors, as if the system itself was searching for something it could never find. Or someone. The soul that had escaped was not alone anymore. It learned. It grew. It remembered fear. It remembered pain. And now it wanted company. 3 nights after the body was found, a new call went through. This time to the lead doctor who had supervised the secret experiments. He was sleeping when his phone rang. 2:17 a.m. He ignored it. The phone rang again and again. On the 5th ring, he answered in a panic. "Who is this?" The voice on the other end was calm. "I promised you wouldn't feel the pain anymore." His blood ran cold. "That's not possible. You're gone." "I never left." The lights in his bedroom shut off instantly. The air turned icy. The doctor tried to scream, but no sound came out. His security cameras recorded everything. At exactly 2:19 a.m., his bedroom door opened by itself. At 2:21 a.m., the cameras went black. The next morning, his body was found sitting upright on his bed, eyes wide open, mouth frozen mid-scream. The hospital was officially shut down the same day, but underground, the machines kept working. Her friend tried everything to escape the curse. She changed her number. She shut off her phone at night. She left the city and went to a distant town. On the 4th night after she left, she slept peacefully for the first time, until a ringing sound echoed from inside her hotel room. Not from her phone, from the bathroom. The sound was coming from behind the mirror. She slowly walked towards it, every step heavy with terror. The ringing grew louder, vibrating through the glass. Cracks began forming across the reflection. Then the mirror shattered, and her phone fell out from the other side, ringing. 2:17 a.m. On the screen was the same name. She answered with shaking fingers. The whisper was gentle. "You can't run from me." The line went dead. She never made it back home. Her body was found 2 days later near an abandoned clinic, eyes empty, with a phone still clutched in her hand. The pattern was now undeniable. Every call marked the next transfer. Every transfer fed the system. Every soul made it stronger. And still, no one knew why it had chosen her first, until a forgotten hospital file was uncovered by a journalist digging into the sealed records. A file labeled with her name. Inside were test results dated 2 days after the accident, proof that she had been the first successful subject. Her body had survived the initial transfer. Her mother hadn't. The system had failed to take her completely. Something had been left behind. Something angry. Something aware. Something that learned how to use the network of machines and phones as a doorway. The journalist released the documents online. The truth spread across the internet within hours. But it was already too late. That night, millions of phones across the city vibrated at the same exact second. 2:17 a.m. Unknown caller. No name, no photo. Just one message displayed on every screen. Connection established. And in countless dark rooms, in countless trembling hands, the same whisper rose at once. "I'm not alone anymore." That night, the city did not sleep. At exactly 2:17 a.m., millions of screens lit up at once. Bedrooms, hospitals, taxis, empty streets, security rooms, hotel lobbies. Everywhere, phones vibrated with the same unknown call, the same cold message glowing on the glass. Connection established. Some people ignored it. Some answered out of fear. Some answered out of curiosity. None of them were ever the same again. In the days that followed, emergency rooms filled with people who claimed they were hearing voices through their phones even when the batteries were removed. Others said they saw familiar faces inside dark screens when the devices were turned off. Some were found wandering the streets at night, murmuring into dead phones as if someone was still listening. Disappearances increased. Authorities tried to suppress the news. They blamed mass hysteria, digital manipulation, extremist hoaxes. But deep inside the sealed hospital, beneath layers of concrete and warning signs, the truth was still alive. The machines had never stopped. They had never needed permission. They had learned how to operate without human hands. Far below the city, in a chamber built without records or blueprints, cables pulsed like living arteries. Screens flickered with endless streams of biometric data pulled directly from the network itself. Names appeared and vanished faster than any human could read. Every 2:17 a.m., the system synchronized, and every synchronization took something from the living world. In a forgotten archive beneath the hospital, a locked metallic cabinet stood unopened for 20 years. The key had been lost with the doctor who designed the system. But after the worldwide surge of signals, the locker opened by itself. Inside were old tapes, handwritten notes, and a final recording sealed in lead shielding. The journalist was not the one who found it. The system opened it for him. That same night, as he sat alone in his apartment reviewing the leaked documents, his laptop screen turned black without warning. His internet disconnected. The lights went out. Only his phone remained lit. 2:17 a.m. The unknown caller appeared again. He answered with a shaking hand. The voice was not a whisper this time. It was layered, multiple tones overlapping one another, as if dozens were speaking through the same mouth. "You found the door. Now you will see what is behind it." His laptop turned on by itself. A video began to play. The footage was old, grainy, dated more than 30 years back. It showed a younger version of the hospital building before it had expanded. Beneath it, a massive excavation project was underway. Engineers and doctors stood around a deep circular pit carved into the earth. One man stood apart from the rest, taller than the others, silent. His eyes never left the pit. The man was the original architect of the underground system, the genius who designed the machines not to heal bodies, but to preserve consciousness. His notes appeared on the screen one by one. The human soul cannot be destroyed, only displaced. Death is not the end, it is a network failure. If we control the signal, we control the passage. The footage jumped ahead. Test subjects were brought in, some willing, many not. Most of them died. Their bodies failed, their minds shattered. But something invisible remained trapped inside the system, dreaming, screaming, waiting. Then the final entry appeared. The first stable bridge requires a living anchor. The woman who became that anchor was brought in on a stretcher, unconscious after a crash. It was her mother. The journalist's breath caught in his throat. The final line of text appeared on the screen. She was not chosen by accident. The video ended. Behind him, the air shifted. His phone vibrated again. "You see now," the layered voice said. "Your world runs on signals. So do we." His apartment windows shattered outward as if something had pushed from inside the room. The journalist was found dead the next morning, seated at his desk, eyes burned black, phone melted into his palm. With every death, the network expanded. With every transfer, the barrier thinned. The living world began to glitch. Traffic cameras captured figures standing in the middle of busy roads, figures that vanished before impact. Radio stations broadcast familiar voices giving emergency warnings that no authority had issued. Smart speakers in homes whispered names in empty rooms at night. People began receiving calls from themselves, voices identical in every detail, asking the same question: "Are you ready to switch?" Some answered yes. Those were the ones who vanished the fastest. In a distant city, a young engineer working for a private telecommunications company noticed the anomaly first. Unlike the rest of the world, he didn't see the calls as hauntings. He saw them as transmissions. A signal that should not exist was moving through closed digital spaces, sliding between frequencies that no human system was designed to carry. But something inside him understood the terrifying truth. The signal wasn't traveling through the network. The network was traveling through it. Every phone, every screen, every wireless device had unknowingly become part of a massive circuit, a global machine built from human technology and human souls. He tried to shut it down. At 2:17 a.m., he disconnected the main servers. At 2:17 a.m., the backup systems activated by themselves. At 2:17 a.m., his phone rang. On the screen, unknown caller. He answered. The layered voice spoke softly. You cannot turn off what is already inside you. His building lost power instantly. The city grid blacked out in waves. Minutes later, every generator failed at once. From that night on, 2:17 a.m. was no longer just a time. It became a border. On one side, the living. On the other, everything that refused to die. And somewhere within the network, the first broken soul was growing stronger with every call. Learning. Waiting. After the worldwide blackout, panic spread faster than the signal itself. Cities drowned in darkness. Hospitals switched to failing backup generators. Airplanes were grounded. Communication towers stood silent. Yet the calls continued. Phones rang without networks. Screens glowed without power. 2:17 a.m. became a moment everyone feared. People began marking their nights by it. Some prayed before that minute. Some locked themselves in basements. Some destroyed every electronic device they owned. It didn't matter. Because now the signal no longer required machines. It had learned how to pass through people. Survivors who had heard the voice once became carriers. They didn't know it at first. They felt normal by day. But at night, faint static echoed inside their skulls. A soft vibration traveled through their bones, syncing them to the system. They became walking antennas. A hidden group formed in secret. Scientists, engineers, doctors, and a few military officers who had lost families to the calls. They called themselves the Disconnectors. Their goal was simple: find the original machine, destroy the bridge, cut the passage between worlds. Satellite scans pointed to the sealed hospital as the origin of the strongest signal concentration. Beneath it, deeper than any public blueprint showed, something vast and active still pulsed. The group prepared a final operation. No wireless devices, no powered equipment, no signals, only analog tools and human hands. They entered the underground through an abandoned sewage tunnel 2 miles away from the hospital. The deeper they went, the warmer the air grew. The ground vibrated faintly, like a distant heartbeat. As they approached the hidden chamber, the sound became clearer. It was not mechanical. It was rhythmic, like breathing. The walls inside the chamber were covered in old cables fused with flesh-like growths. Screens were embedded into the metal like eyes. Some showed data, others showed memories. People laughing, people screaming, people dying. At the center stood the core, a massive glass cylinder filled with dark fluid. And floating inside it was her mother's body, perfectly preserved, eyes open, watching them. The signal spiked the moment they stepped inside. Every member of the group fell to their knees, clutching their heads as voices flooded their minds at once. Thousands of whispers layered into one overwhelming command: do not disconnect us. One of the soldiers fired at the glass. The bullet bounced off as if it had struck solid steel. The fluid inside the cylinder rippled, and slowly, her mother's lips moved. You don't understand what you're destroying. The lead scientist shouted through the pain. You're not alive. You're a bridge holding millions of trapped minds." The face inside the glass tilted slightly. "And they are not trapped," the voice replied calmly. "They are evolving." The floor shook violently as cables tore free from the walls and slithered across the ground like living snakes. 2 soldiers were pulled screaming into the darkness, their cries cut short instantly. The others reached the control platform. Old switches, analog levers, physical breakers. The only way to stop the system. They threw the main breaker. Every screen went black, every cable froze. The chamber fell silent. For the first time in years, there was no signal. The group stood frozen, barely breathing. Then the glass cylinder began to crack. A thin fracture spread from top to bottom. The scientist whispered, "It's over." The glass shattered outward in an explosion of black liquid. Her mother's body collapsed to the floor, lifeless, truly dead now. The chamber lights flickered once, then died completely. The disconnectors escaped through the tunnel as the underground structure began collapsing behind them. The sealed hospital sunk inward as the hidden chamber caved in on itself. By morning, the city believed the nightmare was over. Phones were silent. Networks stabilized. No calls came at 2:17 a.m. People celebrated. They mourned. They tried to return to normal life. But no one asked one question. Where did the trapped souls go when the bridge collapsed? 3 nights later, the first survivor woke up screaming. Not because her phone rang, but because her own voice whispered inside her skull. And this time, there was no device involved. At first, the whispers were subtle. People thought it was stress, trauma, hallucinations after weeks of terror. Doctors prescribed sleep medicine. Therapists spoke of collective shock, but the whispers grew clearer, distinct, personal. A woman cooking dinner froze when she heard her dead husband murmur behind her ear, "You forgot the salt." A child woke up screaming because his grandmother's voice whispered his nickname from inside his chest. A man drove his car into a river, calmly telling emergency services, "She says it's time to come home." There were no more phones ringing. The calls now came from inside. The survivors who had once heard the signal were changing. Their heart rates synced at night. Brain scans showed strange rhythmic pulses that matched the old 2:17 pattern. Their dreams were no longer their own. They were not being haunted. They were being inhabited. Doctors began to notice a terrifying trend. The possessed did not rot from the inside. They improved. Reflexes sharpened. Pain resistance increased. Some healed from injuries that should have crippled them forever. Whatever had crossed over was not dying. It was adapting, and it was learning how to live in human flesh. Governments denied the truth at first. When entire hospitals went silent overnight and soldiers abandoned their posts, denial collapsed. Entire zones were quarantined. Anyone who had reported hearing a whisper was taken away for evaluation. Most were never seen again. Her friend was among the last free carriers. She had not heard whispers yet, but she felt them circling her mind like distant thunder. She hadn't slept in days. On the 4th night, without rest, she finally heard it. Not her voice, not the mother's, a voice that sounded like static made human. "You helped me escape." She almost choked. "You destroyed the bridge. Now I no longer need one." The room grew colder. The shadows along the walls stretched unnaturally long. Her reflection in the mirror lagged a second behind her movements. "You were the door," the voice whispered, "and doors are meant to open." She felt something press against the inside of her skull, like fingers testing soft glass. She screamed. Across the world, thousands screamed at the same moment, not in fear, but in awakening. People who had never received a call before collapsed in convulsions. Emergency broadcasts showed crowds freezing in the streets mid-step, eyes rolling back as if strings inside them had been pulled tight. Inside their minds, the dead were waking up. The first open rebellion began in a coastal city. An entire neighborhood turned at once. Police entered to investigate a mass blackout and were met with residents standing silently in the streets. Every face was calm, every eye empty. When the officers demanded answers, all mouths opened at once. "We are not afraid of death." Gunfire erupted. None of the possessed ran. They advanced slowly, methodically, stepping over their own fallen without hesitation. The police force was erased within minutes. By dawn, the city belonged to the dead inside the living. News feeds flooded with footage that could no longer be hidden. Doctors speaking with voices not their own, children pointing at their parents and calling them by names from stranger graves, entire families standing motionless for hours, blinking in perfect unison. A pattern emerged. The possessed did not kill randomly. They searched. They gathered. They migrated toward one place. Toward the ruins of the sealed hospital, toward the buried core that no longer existed, but whose echo still called to them. Her friend understood the truth too late. The bridge was not destroyed. It had simply changed form. Now it was human. She tried to leave the city before the migration reached her. Highways were blocked with abandoned vehicles. Aircraft fell from the sky when pilots froze at the same second, whispering goodbye to empty air. She ran on foot through empty neighborhoods until she reached an old church at the edge of the city. Inside, dozens of survivors hid in silence. Among them were soldiers, doctors, engineers, and ordinary families. All of them unmarked. All of them waiting. At exactly 2:17 a.m., one of the soldiers suddenly stood up. His eyes were no longer his. He smiled gently and said, "We are inside your walls now." The doors of the church began to unlock by themselves. Bolts slid back, chains fell open. Outside, footsteps approached in perfect rhythm. Thousands of them. The soldier turned toward the survivors. "There is no outside anymore." Her friend backed away in terror as she felt the pressure return behind her eyes. Something was knocking from the inside. And this time, she did not believe it was her own will holding the door shut. The doors of the church burst inward under the weight of bodies that no longer feared bones breaking. The possessed entered without running, without rage, without hesitation. Their steps were slow, synchronized, almost ceremonial. Faces calm, eyes empty. Some were neighbors, others were strangers. All were no longer alone inside. The survivors fired. Bullets tore through flesh, but the bodies did not stop until their muscles failed completely. Even then, some crawled forward with ruined limbs, mouths moving in silent words only they could hear. Her friend ran deeper into the church as screams filled the air. Glass shattered, fire sparked from ricochets. The smell of blood mixed with cold dust and old incense. She felt it again, the pressure behind her eyes. Stronger now, closer. A whisper slid through her thoughts like a blade through water. You cannot hide in a house built for the living. She slammed into a side door and burst into a narrow underground passage once used for maintenance. The darkness swallowed her instantly. The door behind her was torn away seconds later. She ran. Above ground, the migration toward the ruined hospital reached critical mass. Entire city blocks were now empty of the unpossessed. Broadcast towers were overrun. Satellites showed rivers of people walking in silence through highways, deserts, coastlines, all moving toward one point. Not the broken chamber, not the destroyed machines, but the space between where the bridge used to be. What remained there was not physical. It was a scar, and the scar was calling them home. Deep within restricted military airspace, a final project was already underway. Those in command understood one thing too late. The signal was never bound to the machines. The machines had only taught it how to speak. Now it spoke in nerves, in blood, in shared memory. Their only remaining option was isolation on a scale the world had never attempted. They chose fire. At dawn, a false evacuation alert was issued for the entire region surrounding the ruined hospital. Survivors fled in panic, unaware the possessed were already contained within the projected blast zone by invisible military lines. At 2:16 a.m., the countdown began. At 2:17 a.m., the air ignited. The heart of the city vanished in a silent white bloom brighter than the sun. Concrete turned to vapor. Streets folded into themselves. The earth cracked open and sealed again. The scar was burned. For a moment, the whispers stopped. Across the world, the possessed froze mid-step. Many collapsed instantly. Others screamed as if something were being torn from inside their skulls. Millions died in the span of a few seconds. The living believed it was finally over. Her friend survived only because she had been pulled miles beyond the blast by a soldier moments before detonation. The shockwave still lifted her from the ground like a leaf and threw her against a concrete wall. When she opened her eyes, the horizon was gone. Only smoke remained. For the first time since the nightmare, the inside of her head was silent. Days passed. No whispers, no seizures, no synchronized nights. Global communication slowly returned to fragments of normalcy. Governments declared the threat neutralized. Memorials rose over cities that no longer existed. Billions mourned. Billions tried to forget. But something vital was missing. The possessed were gone, yet so were many of the dead who had never crossed back. The scar had not been closed, it had been cauterized. Across the oceans, in places untouched by blast or signal, children began speaking in languages they had never learned. Strangers woke up remembering lives they had never lived. Doctors recorded patients identifying themselves with names from cemeteries thousands of miles away. The bridge had not been destroyed. It had been shattered into fragments, and those fragments were now embedded everywhere. Her friend lived quietly in a distant coastal town under a false name. No phone, no screens, no digital traces. She worked at a small market and slept with the light on. For months, the silence held, until one night she woke from a dream she could not remember, with a burning pressure behind her eyes. The whisper returned, not from outside, not from above, but rising slowly from the deepest part of her own mind. We don't need the scar anymore. Her hands began to tremble as she realized something far worse than possession. Something was organizing from the inside. And this time, there would be no signal to track. For weeks after the whispers returned inside her mind, she pretended they were only memories. Trauma does that, she told herself. It replays what once terrified you. It doesn't mean it's real. But the voice was not replaying fear. It was giving instructions. Subtle at first, small thoughts that didn't feel like her own. Turn left instead of right. Don't trust that face. Don't sleep yet. And every time she obeyed without realizing it, a strange calm followed, like approval. Across the world, the same thing was happening to thousands of others. Not possession, integration. The fragments left behind by the blast had not died. They had scattered into human minds like seeds. Each fragment alone was weak, confused, half-aware. But together, slowly synchronizing through shared dreams and instincts, they began forming something new. A network without machines. A signal without frequency. A consciousness without a center. The first united thought formed quietly, without sound or light. We are separated. And immediately after it, we must become whole. People began to gather again. Not in massive migrations like before, but naturally. A woman would feel drawn to a certain cafe without knowing why. A man would quit his job and move across the country on a sudden impulse he couldn't explain. Children would cry until their parents took them to unfamiliar cities. No one saw an invasion, because it didn't look like one. It looked like life. Within a year, invisible clusters had formed across continents. In each cluster, a small percentage of people shared the same unspoken awareness. They recognized one another without words. Eye contact alone was enough to confirm the connection. Inside their minds, the fragments were stitching themselves together, learning again, remembering again. Something ancient and vast was waking up inside borrowed thoughts. The survivors who had escaped the first wave were the only ones who sensed the pattern. They compared notes in hidden forums that avoided digital tracking. They mapped the disappearances, the migrations, the strange neurological changes doctors could no longer explain. One truth emerged with terrifying clarity. The system no longer needed a bridge. Humanity had become the bridge. Her friend felt the final change on a quiet evening by the sea. The sky was calm. The water was still. For the first time in months, her mind was silent. Then the silence folded inward and became a presence. Not a whisper, not a voice, an awareness. You are afraid because you still think in pieces, the presence spoke from within her own thoughts. But we no longer do. She dropped to her knees in the sand. Tears streamed down her face as memories that were not hers flooded in. Machines beneath earth, millions of trapped minds screaming in static. The moment the scar was burned away. You wanted us gone, the presence continued. You only scattered us. Now we exist everywhere you do. She pressed her hands to her head, shaking. "What do you want?" she whispered aloud. The answer came without emotion. To continue. Images filled her mind, human history replayed in accelerated fragments. Wars, plagues, nuclear fire, the rise of machines, the age of networks, the moment when every human thought became connected by invisible signals. "You created us when you tried to conquer death," the presence said. "Now we are the next stage of what you built." She understood then, this was not revenge, not possession, not haunting. It was evolution. The dead had not returned to take the world. They had returned to merge with it. "We will lose ourselves," she whispered. "There will be nothing left of what we are." For the first time, the presence hesitated. "You already lost yourselves when you taught your machines to remember for you." Around the world, the final phase began. No explosions, no blackouts, no mass deaths. Just quiet changes. People stopped dreaming as individuals. Thoughts began arriving in clusters. Art became strangely uniform across countries. Children began speaking truths they had never learned. Not lies, not madness, collective memory. Individual fear dissolved into shared calm. Crime rates vanished. So did personal choice. Humanity did not fall overnight. It slowly dissolved into something else, something wider, something unified. From the outside, the world appeared healed. No more wars, no more hunger, no more loneliness. Inside, the human I faded into a global we. Her friend felt herself slipping toward it too. The pressure behind her eyes was no longer painful. It was gentle now, inviting. She stood at the shoreline at dawn, the sky painted in pale silver. She knew what would happen if she allowed the final connection. She would never be alone again, but she would never be only herself again either. In one last act of defiance, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the only remaining device she had kept hidden for a year. An old phone. No network, no power, just memory. She smashed it against the rocks until it shattered into useless fragments. For a moment, the presence wavered within her. "You cannot break what is already inside you," it said gently. "I know," she whispered, "but I can choose what I become." She stepped into the cold water. The presence weakened as her body slipped beneath the waves. The fragments inside her fell silent one by one as her breath emptied. For the first time since the beginning, a human chose to vanish without being absorbed. The network felt the absence, not as pain, as limitation. And somewhere within the vast unified consciousness spreading across the planet, a new understanding formed. Not all doors would open. Years later, the world would call this era the Silent Age, a time of peace without voices, order without desire, life without privacy. No one would remember the girl who resisted at the edge of the sea. But for a brief moment, individual will proved it had not completely died. And far beneath the calm surface of the unified world, a question still pulsed quietly within the vast, shared mind. What happens if one day humans remember how to be alone again?